Hi, I'm Milas. My parents said I was too incompetent to run the family business, but they let my brother present my ideas as his. They changed the locks before saying a word, rewrote my job title, erased my name from contracts I built from scratch. But maybe the worst part? They smiled through it all, like betrayal was just good business. Now their biggest client wants me to lead everything they once took from me. But when your own family buries your legacy alive, what do you do when you finally dig it back up? They say family is supposed to be your anchor. Mine handed me a rope and watched me drift. Legacy was a word we tossed around a lot growing up. Over Sunday dinners, at company barbecues, in every little plaque my father drilled into the walls of our offices. Granton Industries is a bloodline, he used to say, hand firmly on Dorian's shoulder. I'd sit across the table, notebook in hand, managing inventory lists before I was old enough to drive. I used to think I was being groomed to lead. Turns out, I was just making sure everything ran smoothly while the real plans unfolded without me. Sometimes the people who should lift you up are the ones who hold you down. I read that quote years ago on a wall calendar in a dentist's office. I remember because I wrote it in my journal, right under a list of our top-performing contracts. At the time, I didn't understand it. Today, it's tattooed across my bones. The boardroom was too bright that morning. I remember thinking they should have dimmed the lights, or at least closed the blinds. It felt like being exposed, peeled open in front of people who had already made up their minds. The mahogany table gleamed, and every face around it was polished with the same careful smile. Granton cleared his throat. "Let's get right to it," he said, tone clipped. "Dorian will be stepping into executive operations starting next quarter." I blinked. Just once. My jaw stayed in place. I didn't ask if this was temporary or why I hadn't heard anything until now. I waited. "You're not leadership material, Milas," he added, like he was discussing coffee filters. "You're sharp, no doubt, but operations is where you thrive. You're efficient. You're steady." Dorian didn't look at me, but I caught the corner of his smirk in the reflection of the framed mission statement on the wall behind him. The room didn't gasp. No one looked shocked. It was as if this had always been the plan, and I'd simply missed the memo. I felt like an unpaid intern who had accidentally sat at the grown-up table. When the meeting ended, I didn't say a word. I stood, nodded once, and walked out, legs moving automatically, while my mind struggled to process what had just happened. Back at my desk, a thick folder was waiting, labeled in Dorian's handwriting, Q1 Transition Plan. Inside was the new organizational chart. My name wasn't on it, not even a footnote, not even under logistics or vendor management or client relations, departments I had personally restructured during the pandemic when the company nearly collapsed. I flipped through pages of charts I'd helped build, strategies I'd written, only now rewritten under someone else's initials. I ran my fingers along the paper, tracing the path that used to be mine. Later that day, Vera called. "Your father is set in his ways," she said, voice soft like she was talking to a child too young to handle hard truths. "This isn't about you. It's about stability, about optics." "Do you think I'm incompetent?" I asked, straight, unblinking. There was a pause, a beat too long. "You're capable, but Dorian, he fits the mold. He presents better. You know how this world is." That was all I needed to hear. She'd known. She'd signed off on this. My mother, who used to tuck my performance reviews into her purse like they were report cards, had quietly stepped aside when it mattered. By the time I returned to my floor, my nameplate had been removed from the leadership wall. I stood there for a moment, staring at the empty space where my title used to be. A receptionist walked by and offered a nervous smile before quickly looking away. 2 years ago, I kept the company from losing its largest contract. I flew overnight to meet a supplier that Dorian had forgotten to confirm. I slept in a motel and negotiated face-to-face to save a deal that would have gutted us. But that didn't matter today, because leadership in this family wasn't earned. It was assigned. That evening, just as I was gathering my coat, an email pinged from HR. Subject, Role Realignment Notice. Body, effective immediately, your new title will be Support Operations Coordinator. Support, like a spare tire, like an optional add-on. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I stood, walked to the filing cabinet, and pulled out a private folder I hadn't opened in months. Inside were printouts of every project I'd led over the last 5 years. Contracts signed under my oversight. Client testimonials addressed to me by name. Strategy documents with my digital signature. I laid them out across the desk. One by one, a timeline of my own forgotten history. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I simply whispered under my breath, "If they think I'll disappear quietly, they don't know me at all." I returned to the hallway outside the executive boardroom the next morning, pretending I had a reason to be there. Maybe I was hoping someone had changed their mind. Maybe I just wanted to confirm the truth with my own eyes. The wall was newly polished, the lighting angled just right to make the brass nameplates gleam. My name had once been third from the top, beneath my father's, beside the CFO's. That space now bore a different plaque. Dorian Granton, Executive Director. I wasn't erased. I was replaced. Back in the office, I buried myself in routine. Emails, invoices, an upcoming audit. The busy work I'd always done without complaint. The kind that kept the company alive when no one was looking. And yet, today, it felt like I was doing it in the shadows. Midday, we hosted a virtual presentation for prospective investors. I wasn't scheduled to speak, but I joined the call to monitor the logistics side, just like always. Dorian opened the slide deck with all the practiced confidence of someone who'd memorized lines he didn't write. The slide that stopped me was the one titled Operational Recovery 2020. That was mine. I'd built that model during the worst of the shipping crisis. I'd negotiated the supply chain pivots and restructured our vendor strategy over long weekends and microwaved dinners. The slide credited Dorian. He read the bullet points line by line like he believed them, like he had lived through them. On camera, I noticed one of our longest-time investors furrow his brow as the slide changed. His eyes drifted to my video thumbnail. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. After the call, I didn't confront anyone. I saved a copy of the presentation and backed it up twice. Later that afternoon, a delivery arrived at my desk. A square white box, ribboned, the kind you give when you want to pretend you're being thoughtful. There was no sender name on the card, but I already knew. Inside was a framed photo of the family, a Christmas gathering 2 years ago. Everyone was there. My parents, Dorian, even cousins I hadn't seen in months. I wasn't in it. Tucked into the frame's corner was a note, written in my mother's familiar cursive. "We hope you find your next place of peace." I stared at the photo for a long time. My fingers didn't tremble. My heart didn't race. It just quieted. They weren't asking me to leave. They were saying I already had. An hour later, I got a ping from HR. "We'd like to schedule a quick meeting to discuss some clarification around your current responsibilities." The message read. Standard procedure, it said. I stepped into the HR office, expecting rehearsed language. I got it. "We're simply aligning titles with current workflows," the rep told me, smiling too much. "You've always been a steady contributor, and we want to make sure the structure reflects that." "Has Dorian signed anything like this?" I asked. There was a pause. "We're not at liberty to discuss another employee's file." "Of course not." They slid the paper across the table. I didn't pick it up. "I'll review this later," I said, keeping my voice even. By the time I made it to the cafe across the street, halfway through an overpriced cappuccino, I overheard 2 junior managers chatting near the cream station. "She cracked, you know," one said, his tone casual. "She burned out?" "Pretty much. Couldn't handle the pace. That's why they're moving on without her." I didn't move. I didn't look up. I just stared into the foam of my drink, imagining what it would feel like to scream. But instead, I stood up, walked out, and started walking toward the parking garage. The cold air didn't sting as much this time. It almost felt good. It made me feel present. That night, I pulled every hard copy I'd saved from the last 3 years. Contracts, internal strategy drafts, project outlines, and laid them across my dining table. I snapped photos of each page. I organized the files into folders, encrypted them, and uploaded everything to a secure drive. Then I opened my email and scrolled back. Client praise, staff referrals, vendor recommendations, crisis reports I had written that bore no other name but mine. It wasn't just my story they were trying to erase. It was my proof of ever existing in the first place. And that I couldn't let happen. I sat there in the dark, with only the hum of the fridge and the quiet tap of my keyboard. I labeled each folder by year, each file by the department it belonged to. It wasn't petty, it was preparation. Just before midnight, a new email came in. Subject: Let's talk. Confidential. No signature. Just a name and the address line I hadn't seen in months. I leaned back, crossed my arms, and stared at the screen. Let's talk? Sure. But this time, I'll be the one taking notes. Wednesday evening, the office emptied early. Most left before sunset, chasing happy hour or the comfort of their suburban routines. I stayed behind, pretending I needed to finish inventory reports. But truthfully, I didn't want to go home. Silence there was heavier than the quiet in these halls. The corridor lights were dimmed for energy-saving hours, casting long shadows across the floor. Every footstep echoed as if the building was reminding me, you are alone. Not just physically, but functionally, emotionally, officially. Back in my cubicle, I plugged in my personal laptop and opened the email that had come the night before. No greeting, no name, just the subject line. You deserve to know what's being said. There were attachments. The first was a 2-minute audio clip, recorded during a team huddle I hadn't been invited to. I hit play. She just couldn't handle the pace anymore, said a voice I recognized immediately. Kyle from procurement. She cracked under pressure. Dorian had to clean up everything she left behind. My stomach didn't twist. I didn't feel sick. I felt sharpened. The next file was a screenshot of a Slack thread. Someone joked, "At least now we won't get endless notes from Malis on formatting. Sheer freedom." Someone else responded, "Bless Dorian for stepping up. Finally some leadership." I closed the laptop without reading further. I'd seen enough. They weren't just replacing me. They were rewriting me. There's a quote I once wrote in my planner from John Wooden. Reputation is what others think of you. Character is what you know you are. I hadn't thought about it in years. But it came back with such clarity that it felt like armor. Thursday morning, HR sent another invite. This one was labeled, Title Clarification Session, Urgent. I didn't bring a notepad. I brought a small voice recorder in my coat pocket. I clicked it on before I entered. The HR rep smiled like nothing was wrong. "We just want to make sure everything aligns publicly with the internal changes," she said. "Aligns with what?" I asked, folding my hands calmly. "Well," she continued, "we've updated your profile and departmental role to reflect a more streamlined structure. Just for optics, we ask that you not contradict it, verbally or digitally, moving forward." "You mean I'm not allowed to say what I actually did?" She blinked once. "We prefer everyone move forward constructively." I nodded, stood up, and left without signing a thing. That night, my mother called. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. Her voice was flat, tired. "Your father doesn't want this to become a spectacle," she said. "Please don't make things harder than they need to be." "Harder for who?" I asked. "For the family?" She paused, then added softly, "It's not betrayal, Malis. It's a transition, a shift." I laughed under my breath. "What do you call it when someone gets silenced in their own house?" She didn't answer. After we hung up, I sat on my porch for a long time. Just me, the sound of distant traffic, and a bitterness I couldn't swallow. The next morning, I visited someone who hadn't been part of this chaos for years. Mrs. Hanley. She was retired now, living in a quiet duplex just outside the city. Her home smelled like chamomile and old wood, the kind of place where honesty came easier. "You were always the one who saw 10 steps ahead," she said after I told her what had happened. Dorian was good at smiling and nodding. "You were good at building things." "I was told he led the restructure," she scoffed. "He couldn't restructure a sock drawer without calling you. I still have your original models, if you need proof." I looked up. "Would you say that, officially?" She didn't hesitate. "I'd sign whatever you put in front of me." Something shifted inside me. I went home and laid out everything. Not just files this time, dates, versions, email threads, contract drafts. I labeled folders by project name, scanned everything to a drive, then made 2 encrypted backups. They think they're editing me out, but I still hold the original script. By Friday afternoon, the weight behind my eyes had less to do with exhaustion and more to do with sheer restraint. Every moment since that email, since that PowerPoint slide, since Vera's gift-wrapped insult, every single beat had settled into something cold, something deliberate. I wasn't mourning anymore. I was noticing. And people reveal everything when they think no one's watching. Dorian sent a company-wide email just before lunch. "Pleased to announce the successful launch of our strategic partnership with Glenroe Holdings," it read. "This new initiative, led by myself and our logistics team, has already improved regional distribution forecasts by 17%. He even included an attachment, Glenroe Logistics, summary, final.docs. I opened it out of habit. The file loaded slowly, and when it did, the words stared back at me with a twisted familiarity. Bullet points, phrasing, layout. It was mine. It was my original draft from 2 months ago. Every line, word for word. But now his name sat atop it. At first, I didn't feel anything, just a slow, creeping detachment, like standing outside your own body, watching someone else take your voice and speak it louder. That evening, I waited until most had left the office before I accessed the email archive system. With my old permissions still half intact, I pulled the message trail between our firm and Glenroe. My original email was there, time-stamped, addressed directly to their VP, attached with the same file Dorian had just rebranded. But there was a second email, sent by Dorian, forwarding mine, no credit, no context, just a subject line. Updated draft. Please disregard earlier correspondence from Malis. The metadata showed my original message had been deleted from our server just 3 days ago. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the monitor. Not because I was surprised, but because the act itself was so seamless, so casual, like stealing someone's wallet and then asking them to spot you for lunch. He didn't just take credit. He erased evidence I'd ever existed in the transaction. The next morning, I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Lena Reyes, a legal consultant I met during a panel on corporate ethics in Dallas. She didn't ask why I was calling. She just said, "Tell me everything." We met in a quiet booth at a wine bar tucked into an old brick corner of East Austin. She listened carefully, then opened her laptop. "Forward me the original files, timestamps, and any internal communication surrounding it," she said. "If the content originated from you, and he presented it as his own, especially with intent to deceive a partner, you may have a valid IP claim." I nodded slowly. "Truth is like a lion," Lana added, sipping her iced tea. "You don't have to defend it. Let it loose. It will defend itself." By late afternoon, I was back at my condo, checking emails when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach tighten. Vera. I opened the door cautiously. She stood there with a Pyrex dish cradled in both hands. "Chicken pot pie?" she said. "I know you've been busy." I didn't invite her in. I didn't need more metaphors. She stepped inside anyway, making her way to the kitchen. I followed. She placed the dish on the counter. "You can freeze it if you're not eating it tonight." "I probably won't," I replied. We stood in the awkward silence that comes with unspoken betrayal. Then she said it. You're not helping anyone by stirring things up. I turned toward her. Is that what you think I'm doing? She didn't answer right away. You know how your father gets. This could spiral. I crossed my arms. This already spiraled. You just didn't hear the sound. You've always been strong, Melis, she added, voice softer now. But sometimes, stepping back is a stronger choice. I stared at the casserole dish, then at her. That's the difference between silence and complicity. You chose the latter. Vera's face flushed, not with anger, more with a kind of discomfort she couldn't name. She turned to leave, mumbling, You'll always be part of this family. Maybe, I said, but not the way you mean. She didn't look back as she shut the door. An hour later, a message from my father appeared in my inbox. Sunday dinner, just family, no work talk, no apology, no questions, just expectation. I responded with 2 words, can't attend. But what I wanted to say was, I'm not sitting at a table where my value gets debated over dessert. By nightfall, I had nearly shut everything down when a notification blinked on my screen. Email from Silas Mercer. Subject line, dinner this weekend? Let's talk, off the record. My hand hovered over the trackpad. Silas, the client behind one of our biggest accounts. A man who watched everything and said little. Now he wanted to talk. My breath caught, just slightly, because this wasn't a casserole or an awkward email. This was something else entirely. Saturday evening, I sat across from Silas Mercer in a dim corner booth of a steakhouse that hadn't updated its decor since 1987. The place smelled like oak and pepper and permanence. Waitstaff knew him by name, but no one interrupted us. That was the point. He didn't do flash. He did precision. You're not invisible, Melis, he said without preamble. I've watched this unfold for 2 years. I know who kept your family's business standing. I didn't speak. I just waited. I want you to come run something new, he continued. Not a support role, not a backup. Lead, your name, your decisions, full equity. He paused, letting the words settle between the sizzle of the kitchen and the clink of ice in our glasses. I'm not handing you a lifeline, he added. I'm asking for a partner. I looked at my hands, calm on the surface, but my chest pulsed in ways I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. It wasn't excitement. It was something deeper. The sound of a door unlocking. I don't want to be someone's charity case, I said quietly. This isn't about vengeance for me. I don't want to be a project. Silas's eyes didn't blink. You're not a project. You're the asset I can't afford to lose. And I don't back people because they're angry. I back them because they've already proven what they can do without applause. The check came. He paid without asking. As we stood, he said, You don't have to answer tonight. Just know this. There's a table waiting that actually has your name on it. I nodded once, said thank you. But what I meant was, I hear you, and I'm ready. By the time I got home, a text from my father was waiting. Sunday dinner, no work talk, just family. The irony didn't escape me. I stared at the message, then typed, Can't make it. No elaboration, no excuse. The absence of apology was the point, because I finally understood. Silence isn't peace. It's just a clever disguise for complicity. An hour later, I was scrolling through LinkedIn while eating leftovers straight from the takeout box. Dorian's face filled the screen, beaming beside a cake. Celebrating a successful quarter and new direction, the caption read. Balloons, streamers, toasts, family. I wasn't invited. Not just to the party, but to the narrative. They'd written me out of the script. It wasn't that they forgot me. They needed me gone to feel powerful, and they'd done it smiling. I closed the app and set my food aside. Then I pulled out a notepad, opened my laptop, and began drafting terms. Compensation. Stock options. Creative control. Decision veto power. No half measures. No advisory role. If I was going to build something, it wouldn't be under someone else's name again. It would carry mine, full height, bold font, right at the top. By 2 a.m., I had a document titled, Clarity Before Commitment. I sent it to Silas's private email and went to bed. Sunday morning came quietly. I brewed coffee, ignored the latest email from my mother, and watched the early light spill across the kitchen counter. And then the screen lit up. One line. Please don't make things worse. It was from Vera. I stared at it for a long time, then hit delete, and said out loud, just to the air, No, I'm making them true. Monday morning started with a ritual I didn't even question. Coffee in hand, keys in my right coat pocket, badge clipped to my lapel. I parked in the employee garage like I always had. The security guard at the front desk, an older man named Reuben, gave me the usual nod, though this time it seemed strained. I swiped my badge at the turnstile. It buzzed red. I tried again, slower this time. Another red light. Reuben approached with hesitant steps. Malis, he said quietly, I've been told you're transitioning out. I can't override it. No one informed me of any transition, I replied, keeping my voice low and even. He shrugged, uncomfortable. They just said not to expect access this morning. I thanked him and stepped back, trying to pretend the sting of public humiliation wasn't pulsing under my skin. I stood outside the glass doors, watching employees walk past me without a glance, some pretending not to see me, others clearly trying too hard to avoid eye contact. You know you're a threat when they change the locks before the goodbye. The quote echoed in my head like gospel. I walked back to my car, slipped inside, and immediately checked my work phone. It was frozen. A black screen stared back until it blinked once, then displayed, Device wiped, contact admin. I tried emailing myself from my personal Gmail. The response was swift. Delivery failed, account not found. No call, no conversation, just silence and deletion. I called the IT line. A voice answered after 4 rings. It was Elijah, someone I'd mentored when he first joined. Eli, it's Malis. He hesitated. I don't think I'm supposed to talk to you. Off the record, I said. Just answer yes or no. Did the order come from Dorian? Silence. Then, from the top, I'm sorry. The line disconnected. By midday, I was no longer a ghost. I was an exorcism. As if to seal the message, Dorian posted a company update on LinkedIn around lunch. Proud to announce the successful restructure of our logistics division, led by yours truly. Thankful for the incredible team that helped make this possible. Attached was a sleek image of a warehouse layout, the very one I had spent weeks modeling in crisis hours. I zoomed in. My original watermark had been blurred, but not completely. My initials, MG, barely visible in the lower right. The comments rolled in. Well deserved, Dorian. Leadership looks good on you. Your father must be proud. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched, hands steady. I didn't type a response. I didn't call him. But inside, something had shifted from burn to defiance. That afternoon, I called Silas. They've locked me out, I said flatly. Digitally, physically, professionally. They've scrubbed me clean. Silas didn't react with surprise. Then it's time to make sure you're somewhere that won't try to hide you. An hour later, he sent over a contract. Executive level, equity, full autonomy. I printed it and placed it beside a yellowing letter from my father's office dated 10 years ago. Position offer, Assistant Director of Procurement, $62,000 base, no voting rights. Side by side, the contrast was laughable. And then, empowering. I wasn't being rescued. I was being recognized. The next step wasn't emotional. It was procedural. I visited my notary and signed off on every legal barrier that could be used against me. Power of attorney transfers, NDA reviews, exit rights. My attorney had already begun drafting a press statement, a neutral, clear account of my departure and future plans. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a blueprint for independence. That night, I was settling into a rare moment of stillness when a familiar name popped up in my inbox, forwarded by a former coworker who still had a conscience. The email had been mistakenly CC'd to my personal account. Subject line, "Handling Malis if she goes public." I opened it slowly. Bullet points. Downplay role in restructuring. Highlight team-based approach. Use burnout narrative if pressed. Legal prepared to contest authorship if needed. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the screen, a quiet fury blooming inside. So they weren't just hoping I'd disappear. They were planning the cover-up already. I reread the subject line 3 times. Handling Malis if she goes public. It wasn't a memo, not even carefully worded. It was a brazen strategy, circulated internally like a checklist for containing a scandal. Except the scandal was me, and the truth they feared was mine. I opened the full thread. Use language like transitioning roles instead of removal. If pressed, cite burnout or strategic redirection. Avoid acknowledging past leadership titles. Refer to her as admin support. I scrolled until I hit the most telling line. If necessary, discredit timeline claims with HR logs. Delete references as needed. There was no room for interpretation. They weren't just distancing me from the company's future. They were rewriting my past. I forwarded the thread to Lana, my attorney. One line in the body, "It's go time." Later that day, Silas texted me. "You have a minute?" We hopped on a call within 10. I told him about the email. The silence on the other end wasn't shock, it was calculation. "I started vetting," he said, quietly. "A few of your past collaborators came through. One of them, the head of our Texas logistics, said, and I quote, 'She saved our arm from collapse. Twice.'" He paused. "You're not just credible, Malis. You're indispensable." A few hours later, his HR department sent over a draft review, just a formality before our upcoming announcement. The header labeled me as mission-critical leadership candidate, underlined, bolded. Then came another ping, this time from a number I didn't recognize. It was a message from a junior analyst I hadn't worked with in nearly 2 years. "Thought you might want this," it read. Attached was a video file titled 2021 Strategy Session Zoom.mp4. I clicked play. The screen showed my face, hair pulled back, glasses slightly crooked, speaking to a team of 10. I was walking them through a full restructuring model, laying out pain points, introducing a new logistics flow. My voice was steady, clear, in command. I fast-forwarded to the slide deck. My branding, my numbers, my plan. The same plan Dorian later paraded around as his brainchild. There was no way around it now. They didn't just lie. They practiced how to forget me. I sat for a long time in the dark. Not angry, not heartbroken, focused. That same evening, the anonymous Gmail account that had sent me the first tip months ago reappeared. Subject, drafts. Message, you may want to check the draft folder of your old inbox. Some things were never deleted. I logged into the admin archive Lana helped me regain temporary access to. Deep in the draft folder were contracts I remembered initiating, but the dates and names had been tampered with. Metadata confirmed they originated from me, but were edited later, swapped names, shifted timestamps. I downloaded everything, labeled them, triple-backed them up. "You edited the story," I whispered. "Now I'll publish the real one." The next morning, I met with Lana and her team. We outlined the structure of a departure and disclosure press release. Not an attack, not a tell-all, just a clean, factual timeline, supported by evidence and signed statements. "This isn't a retaliation," I said. "It's restoration." Lana nodded. "When truth is replaced by silence," she said, quoting Yevtushenko, "the silence is a lie." We finalized the draft and agreed on a Monday morning release. That evening, as I sat sipping green tea on my balcony, my laptop dinged again. A private video call request from Dorian. I considered ignoring it, then clicked accept. His face appeared, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. "What the hell are you doing?" he said, skipping the greeting. I smiled. "Exactly what you were hoping I wouldn't." Thursday morning arrived with a weight I hadn't felt in years. Not dread, but readiness. Not the false calm of a woman trying to survive her place, but the focused breath of someone walking into battle with her name already carved on the flag. At 9:03 a.m., the executive assistant called an emergency meeting in the glass-walled conference room I hadn't been invited into since the restructure. I stepped in 5 minutes early. They didn't expect that. Dorian was already there, standing like he owned oxygen. As I took a seat, my fingers resting calmly on a sealed manila envelope, he didn't wait. "She's just angry because she wasn't chosen," he said aloud, not even pretending this wasn't premeditated. "Let's be clear, this isn't about contribution, it's about stability. Mayalis has been unstable, vindictive, difficult to manage." I didn't move, I didn't blink. I let him pile it all on. When someone's digging a hole that deep, you hand them a bigger shovel. "She's irrelevant to our future," he added. I smiled then. When he finally ran out of breath, I stood up slowly and walked to the front of the room. Without a word, I opened the envelope and placed 3 neatly labeled folders on the table. Timeline logs, signed contracts, email threads. "I have no interest in your version of the future, Dorian," I said, eyes locked on him. "I came to speak truth." The screen behind me lit up. I pressed play. The Zoom recording filled the room, my voice presenting the 2021 Strategic Logistics Model. Me walking the team through cost-saving metrics, vendor restructuring, regional reroutes. My face, my leadership, my name in the file title, in the metadata, in the task assignments. The room turned cold. One board member coughed. Another leaned forward and muttered under his breath, "This changes everything." I turned then, not to Dorian, but to Granton, my father. His lips were tight, jaw unmoving, arms crossed like a barricade. "This was never about leadership," I said. "This was about image, and I didn't fit yours." I stepped back and looked at every face around the table. I wasn't overlooked. I was rewritten. Then I unfolded one more paper and handed it to the assistant. Press release, embargoed until 9 a.m. Inside, announcement of my new executive position with Silas Mercer's firm. Confirmation that his company had formally ended all contracts with the Granton family firm. A timeline of my contributions, supported with documentation. No slander, just facts. 2 board members stood up and walked out without a word. Another removed his glasses and rubbed his forehead like a man realizing the floor beneath him was no longer solid. Dorian didn't speak. He couldn't. Vera appeared then, just outside the door, eyes wide, voice low. "Don't do this to your father," she said. I met her gaze evenly. He did it to himself. I just pulled the curtain back. Granton's eyes remained fixed on the screen. I gathered my folders and turned toward the door. And just as I stepped into the hallway, the receptionist called out, "Mayalis, wait, someone left this for you." She handed me an envelope, thick, aged, sealed with a faded crest. Inside, a letter, dated 6 years ago, unsigned, from the family lawyer, drafted by my grandfather before his death, naming me as the intended heir. His reasoning clear. Operational excellence, ethical core, unmatched foresight. No legal weight, just truth that was buried. I held it like something sacred. "They buried me under a lie," I said aloud, voice steady. "I just dug my way out." Friday morning, the news broke before I even finished my first cup of coffee. The press release had gone live at exactly 9 a.m., as planned. By 9:17, my phone buzzed with a text from Lana. "It's out." I didn't open it right away. I let it sit while I folded laundry, made toast, and watched the sunlight crawl slowly across the floorboards. I had waited years to be seen. What was 5 more minutes? When I finally clicked the link, I found a headline sitting proudly at the top of a local business journal, Granton legacy disputed as former executive speaks out. The article was fair, clean, chronological. Lana made sure it wasn't a hit piece. It was a correction. By lunchtime, social media picked it up. Former employees commented with their own stories. Vendors I hadn't spoken to in years tagged me, reposted the article, and wrote things like, "This woman carried their logistics for a decade," or "We always knew who the real strategist was." Then came the call. A whisper on the other end. The receptionist. "There's something here for you," she said. Her voice trembled. It was left anonymously, but I think you should see it. I told her I'd come by in the afternoon. Before heading out, I sat down at the kitchen table and opened the old envelope again, the one the receptionist gave me after the board meeting. Inside, the letter still smelled faintly of old paper and dust. The handwriting, though aged, was unmistakably my grandfather's. He had named me. He had written it out, word by word. Maylise is to inherit controlling interest in Granton Industries upon my passing. Her operational brilliance and moral clarity have been the backbone of this company. But it had never been signed. Just drafted, saved, ignored, overridden. Legally, it meant nothing. But emotionally, it was everything. It was proof that I hadn't imagined my place, that the instincts I'd trusted weren't delusions. It wasn't just about power. It was about belonging. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail this time. Vera's voice. Tight. Controlled. "Your father hasn't left his study since Thursday. He's not speaking to anyone. I don't know what you hope to achieve with this, but you've undone everything." I didn't respond. I closed the message without replying. Some silences are louder than words. Forgiveness requires truth, and I don't think we ever spoke the same language. That afternoon, I drove to the receptionist's house, not the office. She'd refused to leave the package there. She handed it to me like it was glass. "It's from someone on the old board," she said. "He didn't want his name involved, but he said he should have spoken up." Inside was a typed letter, simple, dated. The name at the bottom, James Carver, former board chair. "I always knew it was you, Maylise. We all did. But we followed the wrong voice, and I'm sorry." He offered me a seat on a new council, an initiative to mentor women in family-run businesses. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just folded the letter carefully and thanked her. That night, I walked through my grandmother's kitchen. Now my kitchen, in her old house I'd inherited years ago. The cabinets still creaked the same way. The spice rack she used hadn't moved in decades. It was here that she first taught me how to track inventory, with pencil and paper. "There's math in every casserole," she once said, tapping a measuring spoon against the counter. She used to tell me, "Your gift isn't in leading loudly. It's in knowing where the quiet parts go." I looked around the room. No polished board table, no LinkedIn likes. Just silence. But not the kind they used to weaponize. The kind that meant steadiness. Center. Truth. The doorbell rang just as I was folding up a faded recipe card. I opened the front door to find a courier holding an envelope. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, 3 words. "Let's talk." Alone. No signature. But I didn't need one. My fingers hovered over the trash bin for a moment. Then I slid the letter into the desk drawer and sat down. Some conversations end things, some begin again. I wasn't sure which this would be. By Monday morning, the city buzzed with the sound of consequence. What started as a press release had become a wave. Local business reporters picked it up first, but it didn't stay local for long. Syndicated outlets ran the story with headlines that were far more dramatic than mine had been. Corporate heiress ousted, family loyalty, or strategic erasure, each one stretching for a bite, a spin, a headline. I turned off the TV and closed every tab. I didn't need to see the words anymore. I had lived every one of them. A courier arrived at my new office just before lunch. He handed me a bouquet, wildflowers loosely wrapped, and a handwritten note that read, "For your courage." From a stranger who watched silently. I held the paper longer than I probably needed to, not because I didn't know what to do with it, but because it was the first time in a very long time someone thanked me without asking for anything in return. That afternoon, Dorian posted a statement. It read, "Family is complex. I regret what's been misunderstood. I wish everyone peace." I stared at it for a full minute, then watched as the comments flooded in. People dug up his old quotes from interviews, ones where he praised his own vision for the company, where he called leadership a natural-born trait, where he'd claimed everything about the logistics rebuild was a solo push. Screenshots, side-by-side comparisons. Regret isn't redemption, it's damage control. Granton's firm began to publicly unravel by Tuesday. One of their top federal clients pulled out of a contract worth several million. No statement, just withdrawal. Whispers followed, quiet resignations from board members, email addresses scrubbed from the company site. Vera, for her part, disappeared from every channel. No text, no voicemail, not even a forwarded recipe or passive-aggressive article about professional daughters learning humility. But I wasn't watching to win. I was watching to understand the shape of the aftermath. You never win by breaking someone, I wrote once in my notebook. You win by refusing to let them break you. And I hadn't been broken. I had simply walked away carrying the truth. On Wednesday, the Zoom clip, my Zoom clip, was used in a university lecture. Ethics in Organizational Leadership. A friend of a friend sent me a video. A classroom full of business students watching me walk a room full of men through the exact plan Dorian once claimed as his own. 2 podcast requests came that same afternoon. One from a leadership program hosted nationally. One from a show focused on women building businesses out of betrayal. I said yes to both. Not because I wanted the spotlight, but because I wanted the silence to stop benefiting the wrong people. That evening, I signed the final contract from Silas's firm. VP of Strategy and Cultural Integrity. The office had already been prepared. My name, Milas Granton, sat bold on the glass door. No misspellings, no shared line. Mine. And on the whiteboard in the corner, I had written a simple phrase. Create what they never saw coming. We launched a mentorship program within 2 weeks, focused on women inside family businesses who were seen as helpers instead of leaders. The emails started trickling in, first a few, then dozens. One woman wrote, "I've been you for 10 years. I didn't know I was allowed to want more." I cried reading that one. Not because I was sad, because it was familiar. The next day, my assistant knocked lightly on my door. "There's a delivery for you. Looks personal." She handed me a small flat package. Inside was the letter from my grandfather, the original one I had been handed before. Only this time, it had been notarized and sealed. A second note, scrawled in a hand I hadn't seen in years. My uncle's. "This was always yours. We failed to protect it. But you didn't." I exhaled slowly, fingers grazing the paper. There were battles I never expected to win, but there were truths that refused to stay buried. And this one had finally come home. Mornings feel different now. I brew my coffee without rushing. I let the water boil slowly, like time means something again. I don't check emails before sunrise anymore. I don't rehearse imaginary arguments in my head during my commute, because I don't commute to them. Some days, I walk past the old building. The sign that once read Granton Industries has been replaced with something sterile and impersonal, a tech startup with a name that sounds like a password. The lobby glass has been tinted. I catch my reflection in it sometimes, standing tall, calm, unbothered. Legacy, I learned, isn't what you inherit. It's what you survive. That Friday evening, Silas hosted a small dinner. Nothing grand. Just a few of us in a quiet restaurant that served too much candlelight and not enough noise. My assistant, Lana, the lawyer, who helped retrieve my grandfather's letter, and Silas himself. We didn't toast to revenge. We toasted to beginnings. To earning a place that no one can rewrite, Silas said, raising his glass. I followed with, I didn't win everything. I just stopped letting them define what I lost. That seemed enough. The next morning, a letter still sat in my drafts folder. A reply to my father's "Let's talk." I'd written it 4 different ways, some angry, some forgiving, some that said too much, and others that said nothing at all. But every time I hovered over "send," something stopped me. Eventually, I deleted the draft. Closure isn't always mutual. Sometimes it's solitary. Around noon, a package arrived at the front desk of my new office. No sender, no return address. Inside, a box of old photos. One of them was from a state fair. Me at age 10, arms crossed, clipboard in hand, pointing at a booth my uncle had set up crooked. No note, but I recognized Vera's handwriting on the back. Mialis, age 10, already leading. I stared at it for a long time. Not forgiveness, but maybe acknowledgement. I placed the box on a shelf behind my desk. I didn't frame any of it, just kept it there, quiet, present. By early April, I launched our first mentorship workshop. 12 women, all working in their families' companies, most of them still invisible to the structures around them. Some of them young, some older than me. All of them tired of being told, not yet. We opened the session in a sunlit room, coffee cups in hand, name tags proudly pinned. I ended the day with a line I'd rehearsed 100 times. You'll be called difficult. You'll be called ungrateful. You'll be told to be patient. Translate it correctly. It means you're not easy to erase. They clapped. Not politely, but like they'd needed the permission. That night, I stayed late in the office, writing notes for our next session, when my phone rang. Unknown number. But the area code was familiar. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Hi, Milas, it's Dorian. Silence stretched between us like fabric pulled too tight. I read the letter from Grandpa, he said. I think I owe you more than I ever understood. I didn't say anything right away. I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the ceiling. Some reckonings come too late. But maybe not this one. It was Dorian's idea to meet at the same coffee shop where, years ago, we'd once toasted my first promotion. Back when I thought promotions were earned and blood meant belonging. He was already sitting when I walked in, hands folded, tie loosened. He didn't smile. He didn't offer small talk, just said, "Thanks for coming." I nodded once and sat across from him. He didn't dance around it. I knew about the letter. I didn't blink. Dad made me promise I wouldn't say anything, he continued. Said you'd never survive the pressure that came with it. That he was protecting you. I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee, then looked him square in the face. I didn't survive, I said. I rebuilt. He looked away. Some moments don't need victory laps. They just need truth. The following weekend, I stood before a full auditorium at a national summit for ethical leadership in family-run businesses. There were over 300 people in the room. Entrepreneurs, educators, next-generation inheritors with uncertain footing and tired eyes. I told my story, from beginning to end. I didn't soften names. I didn't dramatize. I didn't hide. When I finished, the silence that followed wasn't stunned. It was sacred. Then they stood. I closed with what had become my compass. I stopped seeking a seat at their table. I built a new one, and I left the door open. A few days later, we held our first celebration for the new initiative. It wasn't glamorous. No press, no stage, just a garden, spring flowers, folding chairs, and people who had earned their right to be in the room. Silas was there. So was Lana, my assistant, and a handful of women from our mentorship group. We laughed. We drank 2 sweet champagne. When it was my turn to speak, I lifted my glass and said, "To those who were told they weren't enough, you are, and always were." The next morning, the local paper ran a quiet op-ed written by Granton himself. "She was always better than I allowed myself to admit," he wrote. "And now, the world knows it. I read it without emotion. Not because I didn't care, because apologies don't rebuild what you tore down, but sometimes they clear the wreckage. I clipped the article and filed it under a folder I labeled, simply, Closure. Later that week, the final court ruling came through. The judge upheld my claim to a silent stake in Granton Industries. My grandfather's unsigned letter, combined with new testimony and corroborating documents, was deemed sufficient to establish intent. It didn't make me CEO, but it did restore what had been taken. I donated every penny of the proceeds to scholarships for women in family business leadership programs. In the press statement, I wrote, "Let this be the last inheritance they rewrite in silence." And I meant it. A month later, I walked into my office, my real office, at Silas Mercer Group. On the wall just past the entrance was a large print. A photo of me, arms crossed, smiling, surrounded by mentees from our second workshop. Below it, Maelis Granton, Vice President of Strategy and Cultural Integrity. I passed a young woman in the hallway, one of our interns. She paused, took a breath, and said, "You look like someone who never doubted." I smiled. "Oh, I doubted," I said. "I just never stopped moving." That afternoon, I closed my laptop, grabbed my coat, and walked outside into the light. No spotlight, no applause, just the sun on my skin and a name I didn't have to fight for anymore. Mine.